doing cataclysmic multi-billion-dollar crashes in the middle of all of this work stuff, and you get a call and he's like, okay, I need help going to the doctor, and it's like, boom, you have stage 4 cancer. That doesn't make you boss. That means you work for everybody. Everybody's your boss. Pressure is a privilege. You just say yes to whatever work you can get because the phone might stop ringing. Authenticity is more important than pedigree.
JPEG sold for $69 million at Christie's.
Films aren't finished, they're abandoned. The map you don't make, you empower your team to make it.
This is crisis leadership in real time with millions of dollars on the table. So thank you, Figge, for being here today on UpgradeMe.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So before the Super Bowls, before any of all this, what were you actually doing with your hands? What were you building? How did you start getting creative?
I love movies. Like movies are just, I think it lets you tap into another, like storytelling is so transporting, you know? I'm from LA too, so I think there's a lot of like film culture out there. I wound up going to film school. It was like choosing between, you know, if I wanted to go into business, engineering, film school. I want to go to film school. And when I got out, I started working in experimental filmmaking that was like, it's a very niche thing that I got into, because in LA you could get a lot of niches for films. So it was a lot of dream sequences for movies.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, there's a moment in the very first Twilight movie when Bella, she's like dying, she's like, and they have to like turn her into, spoiler alert, they turn her into a vampire and she lives for, so that like minute-long sequence is a highly edited experimental filmmaking thing of, you know, what does it look like? What does she see when she's dying? Like that type of stuff. I was really working on like just trying to, you know, do the work in movies. And when you're in film school, a lot of the time it's like people will tell you, like the smart people will say, hey, come out. When you come out to LA, like you have to, you know, put your ego aside. You have to be ready to like, you know, pour a lot of coffee, you know, do grocery runs and stuff.
Or fold cables.
Anything, yeah. But like that's the thing about it that's so nice. Like when you come with that attitude, when you don't like come entitled, when you're like, all right, yeah, like who needs coffee? Everybody good, you know?
Yeah.
You don't stay doing that forever. Like they move you up pretty quick. So I got to learn a lot of the stuff, and you know, within a year out of film school, like working on movies that actually make it to the big screen, like that's kind of what people set out to do.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I started. I think maybe one of the bigger turning points is like that studio was very small. It was very cool. They did a lot of great work and worked on movies. But we got approached by some designers who were putting together Kanye West Glow in the Dark tour.
Right.
And they were like, we want what you guys do in experimental filmmaking, but we want that for the concert.
Right.
And we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what does that mean? You know, And this is 2007, I think. Everybody else was busy. It's like a business. So everybody else was busy working on movies. And they were like, I was 20 years old. So they go, why don't you send Figge? He'll figure it out. So they sent me. I didn't know how concerts get made, man. Like, I show up to a concert and I'm like, I don't know. Somebody opens a box and concert fairies make this thing. Like, I don't know. How does all of this get here? I don't know. I, you know, was kind of fish out of water, but like went to the Forum in LA, which is a big arena, and they've rented it for a couple of weeks. This is how you put together a show. They're like, okay, like we have all this stuff. We got to figure out how to like connect it all together. I was like, man, I don't know how any of this works. So I had to read the manuals, and I stayed there for like 4 days, just reading everything. I would go to the Target across the street, buy new clothes. I would like shower at the floor. Like, wow. I was like just afraid I was going to lose my job. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That wasn't the time when he was also living in an arena.
No, that was later. That was Mercedes. Yeah, that was a different phase. But I mean, living in an arena is like something you do in live events a lot. Of course, this is where the thing happens, right? You know, by the end of that like 3 week stint, like I kind of knew how a lot of this very complicated machinery came together. And I didn't know what it meant at the time, but it was like there was a lot of things changing in the touring world. You had situations where like, you know, if you go to Times Square in New York, there's all these like screens and stuff. Like all of that was being miniaturized and made portable. So he had like, you know, basically a cinema screen, just like movies that I wanted to work on, but like you would do it for graphics. You know, I kind of fell into live events after that. So I stopped doing that stuff. Mainly it was a very stressful environment, and I wanted to learn more. I want to learn 3D animation because I think I was very restricted by what I can, you know how it is whenever you want to like upgrade a skill in life. You're like, sometimes you got to take a step back, take a step forward. And like, I was so busy just like making ends meet that I couldn't like learn how to do 3D animation. So, and at the time, like YouTube didn't really exist in the same way. Like you couldn't learn online, you couldn't watch a video.
Sure.
You'd have to find people on like message boards or something. I took time off and I wanted to upskill. So I went and I taught myself 3D animation, locked myself in a room, 16 hours a day for like 30 days. I didn't have that much money, but like, you could stretch every dollar and like, just be like, I'm going to learn this stuff. And one of the guys I met online was this guy named Beeple, who's like an amazing digital artist.
Sure.
He was working in Wisconsin as like a web designer at the time, but I started like bringing him onto gigs with me and we would do concert gigs. And so those concert people would call me back and we would work on different concerts because like there's only like every time somebody buys all that gear, there's only so many people that know how to put that all together.
Right.
And yeah, I think also like when you're putting all that stuff together, it's like, it's very technical at first, but if you do that enough times, you're like, okay, this is boring. Like I already know how to do all this. So what else can you do? Is you start getting creative with it.
Sure.
And when you have those ideas, you're not just plugging in cables or whatever. When you have a point of view, like more people want you more involved. So I started working on like theme parks and National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Like I started working on museums and theme parks and concerts and so I was doing all that stuff for a couple of years, but I realized in any capacity that I worked on that stuff, it was kind of like a side project for whatever studio I was at. I'd come in as a freelance lead and do something. And I don't think any of them really saw it as like a durable opportunity. I think they all were like opportunistic about like, okay, this is a great little thing for us, and then we're gonna get back to our meat and potatoes.
Yeah, sure, like a one-off experimental kind of a... Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And so like people want to do a portfolio, people want to do it just because it's a change of pace, but I was like, no, I think this is like a thing, like I've seen enough of this now that I think like this as a field will grow. I think like screens will become ubiquitous, like more technology will be in more entertainment. And I struck out on my own in 2010 and I founded Possible, which is a live event design company, but it's like kind of industry agnostic, creative, like does a lot of different stuff. And yeah, it's still around. I'm still an owner, but I don't really do it day to day. It's been around for 16 years. And it's probably like one of the top 3 firms in the world at like doing that. And during my time there, I designed over like 200 arena and stadium tours. Like I did a lot of stuff there. And it ranged from like music to esports to luxury and fashion. So like there's a lot of different ground to cover there. It's kind of like the long version of like what I was doing before. But I, by trade, I started as a filmmaker.
Yeah, that's right. UC Santa Barbara?
Santa Barbara, that's right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that. As an artist who then goes into the business front, where did that work out for you? Did you feel like you always had kind of the architectural mind for running teams? Or was it something that came after you had already kind of started to get your bearings? Because I noticed that one of the first projects you did with Jess Regal was for Harley Davidson while you were still in school, right?
Yeah.
Clearly there was some entrepreneurial mindset that's not just in the 4 walls of the school. Like
that's a good point. So that was more of like you pair up with people that you want to work with and you do projects, do films. I didn't think I had an entrepreneurial bone in my body. Like my parents weren't entrepreneurs. Like they did things their whole life that weren't entrepreneurial. So I didn't really have that background, but I think I got a lot of mentors along the way who just teach me about like leadership. And sometimes you encounter people in life, everybody teaches you, even if they teach you like the opposite. Like if you have a bad manager, you're learning from them how not to manage, right? And so
what
like
you really need,
Right, and so like you go, oh wow, this environment's really stressful. Why is it stressful? Okay, like don't do this in the future, or like, oh, we're gonna save money on this thing and we're gonna like go the cheap route, and then it winds up being expensive later. You should just buy the more expensive version so it's more reliable. Like you learn these lessons as you go. Actually it was one of those things where like, I'm rewinding the clock, this is a pretty universal, okay, so I tell my parents, hey, I'm going to do filmmaking. And they go, well, you should probably get a backup.
Oh, okay.
You should probably do something else.
What were they up to?
Well, they just want, it's a hard thing. If you have kids and they go like, I want to go into like a very competitive like field where like not very many people make, they go, okay, like you should diversify.
You don't have family connections and like.
Yeah, you have no family connection. Like we don't have any.
What were your folks doing?
Yeah, well, I was born in Oxford, but I lived in LA. My mom was a preschool teacher. My dad was a graphic designer. So I got the graphic design part.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
sure.
He taught me a lot of like fundamentals that were really good. But no, I think it's very sensible. Like it's any parent would say that, okay, you could take the film classes, but you got to take business classes too. I actually really like business.
Yeah.
It was very fun. But one of the things you learn when you're studying business is specialization of labor. They go, yeah, if you want to get good at something, that means saying no to other things.
Yeah, radical focus.
Right. And so I did all the classes and I got up to like, okay, I got to take like 6 more, no, I think it was like only 2 more accounting classes. I was like, yeah, but radical focus. And it's like, I could double major in business, but what if I just double down on cinema? And so I actually didn't finish. I was like within 2 classes of getting it done with business.
Yeah.
And instead I took like Chinese cinema. And I learned about that instead. I took Italian cinema. Like I just learned other cinema instead of finishing this other thing. But like, I do think that's a really important lesson that even I take to Yuga today, which is like, sometimes when you say yes to something, it's about saying no to the other things that could get in the way of that.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned that your father was also in visual arts. I guess there's some degree of creativity and spontaneity in teaching preschool as well. Keeping up
of course,
with all the activity that's going on. Where do you feel like your drive comes from? You mentioned there was some kind of mentors early on and maybe heroes. I'm looking at like, was it necessity? Were you trying to follow in a certain mentor's footsteps? Or was there just pure internal curiosity? Like how did that drive start to develop?
Maybe the pessimistic version is like, I think when you're trying to make it in an industry as competitive as film, especially if you're freelancing, you just say yes to whatever work you can get because you're like, well, the phone might stop ringing. Like this is a very common thing that anybody in the creative field is like, you might start overbooking yourself. You might, it's like, do less, man. But it's a very common fear. And even years later, I talk to people that are 10 years in and they're like, I doubt that it will. It's just like, so like that's probably the more pessimistic one. But the optimistic one is something you touched on, which is like, I think that curiosity is like the most important quality. Like, I think that my favorite people are really curious people, who just like to turn things over and see what really makes things tick. And so I've always been like a curious person. And the other thing is like, I just had a streak of like really good mentors. So, like learning lighting from the guys who did Daft Punk. Wow. Amazing, right? Yeah. And then, TV shows, I learned this is a really great producer named Lee Lodge. He was very, he's very demanding, worked on the Oscars, the Emmys, VMAs. And he was very exacting about the detail. He'd fight for all the details. So he's another great man. And I've got like a lot of teachers along the way that don't present like teachers, but like they really are if you pay attention.
Right.
And so you get to learn different facets of like each of these disciplines and stacking them together. So I think deep down there's still, maybe if I inspected it enough, like there is that kind of like, okay, you got to like just do the work because like the phone might stop ringing. But like that won't happen to me. At this point, I think the curiosity's really taken that over. Yeah. And I just, will lose myself in 2 days down a rabbit hole.
For sure.
This is a very common thing for people with a lot of curiosity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think in recent years, I felt like, researching and learning have become some of my favorite things to do, right? So, given the opportunity, we met and, we're flipping around less than 24 hours later. Like I had a lot of fun, like doing homework and learning about all the different metamorphosis levels of your life and career. And, it's super fun for me.
It's a quick turnaround, man. Like to learn all that background, even the Harley Davidson with Jess Regal. It's like 2006, 2007.
Exactly, man. So I'm curious, like, coming locally near Los Angeles and Santa Barbara, from Oxnard, not everybody who decides to stay local would have the opportunity to reach global networks or run the premier, digital art and fintech merging in a company, right? With Yuga. What was it about you that started to unlock, right? I understand, going around the States and working on different projects within the country is one thing. But then now, in a recent interview, you said that what you love about the community is you can throw up the bat signal and then, within a number of hours, you're sitting down to lunch in any major city in the world with like-minded people. Yeah. Like, what do you think it was that kind of like flipped that switch and made you start thinking on a global level?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing about the Bored Ape Yacht Club that's really interesting. Global community. I haven't seen anything like it outside of like, I don't know, maybe like politics or religion. Like this kind of community building, super intense, where you can like travel around the world and there's people with like a common view of like doing this thing. It's a subculture for sure, but like being able to find your people anywhere you go. We just did an event in Ibiza, and when we got there were 2 apes that were very proud. They were like, we're from Ibiza, so let's show you around. Nice. And like, we had to figure out dinner. There was like a jam, something went wrong, and they were like, no, this is our time. We got it. Right. And like they led us straight to a thing we never would have been able to figure it out. like local experts all around the world.
Yeah.
And I just like that as a conceit. I think it's so fun that you could be part of something, and that you could return the favor. Like if somebody came to LA and they want to see LA, like I could show you LA.
Yeah.
And I know that it would be reciprocal in other places. And that's what I'm seeing here in Taipei. Like everybody's showing Taipei through the Bored Ape lens, like through the community's lens. And why do I think about that on a worldwide level? Well, like I've seen a lot traveling and working on these concerts, like the different regions of the world, and like different people do business in different ways. And I think here in Asia, it's really important to come in person and to have that conversation over the table. It's just very different. You can't do it over a Zoom call. Yeah. Like it's a different level of seriousness.
We like to say there's a lot more foreplay.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we made, so I've only been CEO for about 2 months now, but we made it a priority to come out here because in our field, in Web3, it's a very big community-based thing. And I think we're pretty strong in North America. We're pretty strong in Europe. But it is a faraway thing. It's a huge time commitment to go out to Asia and to make sure that the communities are out here are galvanized, that they're really like feel strong. But when people ask me like, hey, so you're going to Asia, what kind of meetings do you want? Do you want media? Do you want B2B? Do you want B2C? Do you want partnerships? And my answer is like, I want to meet with the community first and foremost. Like that's the highest priority. And then there's partnerships and we could do after. Yeah. But like, if you do have a strong community, it kind of makes everything else easier, right? Like we just did an event here, tons of people show up. Right. That makes it easier to do partnerships, to do media, to do all the other stuff. So I don't know, I think flipping around the priorities a little bit in an unintuitive way. Yeah. Also, we're like an online community. We're like a chronically online. Like everybody's always online with Twitter in our community. So why do we need to take the time out to meet in person? It's like, because I think one good live event where you're all together is better than like a year of Discord. It's better than a year of Twitter. Like, of course, you get to know everybody. It really humanizes everybody on the other side of the table. So that's been a really important part of the agenda for sure.
Yeah, we had a community member that was at the event recently here in Taipei, and she asked a really important question. She asked me, she's like, what's the slogan of Nike? I was like, just do it. And she's like, what's the slogan of Adidas? I was like, I don't know, we fired Kanye? Like, I have no idea. Like, and she's like, yeah, exactly. They've changed the mission statement so many times. You don't know. Yeah. What really defines an organization is that radical focus, that kind of singular vision, that daringness to risk and fail. When we look at BAYC, what is that radical focus and mission? Like when we distill it down to the just do it, where are we headed?
Yeah. So there's a couple different lenses to look at this from, and you have to rack the focus depending on, because we have this perception that you're operating on like, ground that is going to stay stable. But like the main thing I've learned working in blockchain and Web3 is like, the only constant is that the ground will change, always. BAYC is the best club on the internet. It's like a bold statement, but that really means like, you're not going to find a group of people on the internet that are interested in digital assets, or interested in self-improvement, that are interested in getting to know like-minded people to the degree that the best club on the internet will let you. And so it's an open-ended statement. We're the best club on the internet. But I think when people try to figure out what that means for themselves, and they experience that somewhere else, like they go to someone else's event. We go to an event here in Taipei, and somebody shows you, this is what it looks like, in my opinion, to be the best club on the internet. And somebody says, well, this is what it looks like. And so everybody's kind of contributing to this idea of the best club on the internet. And it's a really powerful like vision, because if you had this ideal club, like what would it be? What would make it the best club? But more recently, something that's come into focus, because the ground has been shifting a little bit, is collectors collect. Like when you really look at what has brought a lot of attention to our field, it's been collectionism. Like collectionism is such a big concept, and it's like tale as old as time, like people used to collect seashells and stuff, right? Like you see it through like the hype beast complex con kind of vibe. But right now you're having real conversations about like different traits that the different Bored Apes have, and like why some people like one trait over another, and they are trying to find the one that connects most emotionally with them. And that is something that's like hyper unique to our, I think it's one of the things that has helped to like elevate it to another level. Why it is like when you Google NFT, you'll find it'll just be Bored Apes.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Sure.
The thing that has made it that way is people have an affinity towards the traits. They have an affinity towards collectionism. And when people look at like what they're proud of in the Bored Ape Yacht Club, I think a lot of people are proud collectors. They want to show you what they've collected, what the story is, why they collected it. You know, there's a good friend of mine recently who's a very successful angel investor, got a Bored Ape with a halo and a VC vest, and it was just perfect, right? Right. And so people trying to find their stories within our collection is a big part of it. But yeah, it's the best club on the internet, and it's full of collectors that collect.
I'm always very curious about how people who have influence and success structure their philosophies, their time management, their leadership principles. And of course, being a creative, like, it brings it to a whole other level for our discussion purposes. But you co-founded Possible, right?
Yeah.
And you went through a decade of designing shows for Lady Gaga, for Ariana Grande, Paul McCartney, the who's who of, the top tier of musical acts in the world. What does that do to your brain? How does thinking in stadiums change how you see everything else?
You know, when you're working at that level, like, it's a fiercely competitive thing to do, like, a creative business in LA. Right. That is like one of the hardest things you can do.
100%.
And so,
and to do it with humility, as you said, right? That's even
I think
crazier.
It's part of it. It's important to not get over your skis with that type of stuff. But when I think of like what it's done, it's quietly made me very competitive, but maybe just with myself. Like, do I think the work is good? Is this really good? Is this the best that I'm capable of?
Right.
And so sometimes that shows up in unhealthy ways where you just start like working all the time.
Right.
And you're like, I could just make this better. I can make this better. I can make this better. And then
it needs to be better.
It needs to be better. And then like, you know, you could be hard on your team too, because you're like, no, like I know somebody is capable of doing better. I know they're not bringing like their A game to it. So like it can get very difficult over long periods of time. It's just any high performance thing. But, you know, I think that's what has staying power is you're really honest with yourself about like, is this the best work I can do? Like, am I proud of this work? And, you know, I think you have no choice when you're working at that level in concerts. Like, it has to be the best or you're not going to get the call.
Yep.
You know, that's something that's really common in creative. It's just like, can you push yourself? And that's why I try to make friends with people that like, you know, if you see their stuff online, you're like, wow, it's just really good.
Yeah.
Whatever the work is. Right. Like, it's inspiration. So it's less of a competitive thing to like, oh, that changes my bar of like what good is. That's good. Yeah. Okay, so I got to get better, you know?
Yep. 100%. So when you're in the, let's say, you're going into designing a Lady Gaga arena show, what are you holding in hand at the start of it? At the beginning of your career, you said that this didn't even exist and you would just walk in and it's like, let's get creative. But when you get to a certain level, you know, I'm sure there's some framework, there's some, maybe a template, you know, maybe you've got a mood board, a storyboard, a spreadsheet of cues, a 3D rendering. Like, what does it look like when you start? And then, you know, or maybe you have a 3D render in Unreal, right? What happens in the first 90 days of designing something of that magnitude?
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of different entry points to, you know, putting those shows together. And honestly, like the ways in which you can participate on a creative team, it varies artist to artist. So like with Lady Gaga, for instance, she has a great team around her. She herself is brilliant. Yep. I first started working with Lady Gaga because there's a designer named Leroy Bennett who he started with Prince. He's like one of the best in the world at this. And he puts together like really creative, you know, setups for Lady Gaga. He's a production designer. And in the capacity for that, like the thing I can bring to the table the most is how you can treat media surfaces. And so you got to interact with like lighting, figure out what they're doing. You know, from a production design standpoint, it's like what features are going to be on the stage even. And before all of that is maybe like there's a bigger conceit for the show. Like, do we want to make this an ode to brutalism? Do we want to make this, you know, like what is it that we want to do here? You know, so if I'm thinking like, this was 2018 actually, she was doing a residency in Vegas, Park MGM. Yeah. And it was for our show Enigma. And so Roy Bennett had made a lot of different kind of landscapes, like nothing was very linear, and it was almost like Blade Runner inspired in a way. Yeah. And just figuring out how to tell that kind of like Enigma, Chromatica story on these different canvases. I think with the artist too, like a musician, one constraint. It's not as open-ended as like a film is.
Yeah.
Like a film will have a script. Like there's hit songs and you've got to put them in a certain order, and maybe you group these 4 songs together and there's a theme around it.
Sure, narratives of the album as well, right?
Right. And do you want it, like for a concert specifically, it's like, well, do you want to do a 3-minute song? Do you want them to actually be 4 songs put together with band vamps, so it's actually one continuous set? Do you actually want to mash them up in the middle? So like there's a bunch of different ways you do it, but like what's really helpful when you're building a concert is like that what the track list is, sure. What the time code is. So there's a thing called time code that goes to track. Like this is the arrangement. Mm-hmm. And then based off the arrangement, you kind of architect creative around it.
Right.
That type of stuff is very helpful when you're trying to get your scaffolding together. So usually there's like a track list and there's a set design. And if you don't have those 2 things, you need to go even early, like what do we want to do? So for her, a lot of there's some gesture of like, oh, I would like to be like this, or like that. So, okay, there's a rough stage design here, and then there's a track list, and you just kind of like figure that out. Usually there's a choreographer who tells you, okay, we're going to be downstage, we're going to be upstage, we're actually going to fly in, she's going to wear a disco ball suit, and she's going to be flying in from the back of the audience. So you're like, oh, okay, cool. What is your role as part of this piece? Because your role is maybe different, like if she's coming in, and that show she did, she was wearing full-on disco ball suit, like playing on an instrument on the way in. It's like, well, we don't need anything on the stage. That's not the focus. Like it's just spotlights on her. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do that content really minimal.
Right.
Because it's all about her.
Yeah.
But once she lands on the stage, boom, that's a moment where we activate. So it's like, it's not always about like, oh, what is your work individually as an artist? It's like, what is your contribution balanced with everybody else's contribution? Like, is it your moment or is it somebody else's moment? And that's something common in music. It's like, is this my part? Or like, and if somebody says, no, like we want to go wild, like this is what's the biggest we can make it? It's like, okay, let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. That's pretty, just mind boggling to think about that you're at the, you're right in the center of this, ecosystem building, and like, it's the marriage of imagination and possibility all at once. Like it just must be such a fucking rush.
Yeah. It's a really open-ended, thing to solve for.
Yeah.
And I think as I've grown in my career, when you start off, you really need a lot of structure. You need somebody more senior to set structure for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then as you start like managing people, you're like, oh, I'm setting the structure now.
Right.
And then as you really grow in your field, you're like, there is no structure. There never was. It was all an invention just so you could get stuff done.
Yeah.
So what can I do outside of all of that? It's like, what are people unexpectedly, how do you surprise them? So yeah, it changes with more experience, I think.
And speaking of surprises and changes, you won the Emmy in 2020 for extended reality stage using Unreal Engine. At the time, that's bleeding edge tech applied to live entertainment.
Yeah.
Right? What was the moment you realized the future of culture was going to be built on technology infrastructure rather than just performed on top of it?
It's hard to know those things as like solid, because I feel like it's like fashion, it's like it comes in and out of cycle.
Sure.
Right. And so technology comes in, and like right now, I would say like today, there's actually like been a rotation out of a lot of super high-end production. If you look at Justin Bieber, for instance, Coachella, it's just like him and a laptop.
Right.
And the songs he's recording is not in the studio, he's recording on like an iPhone. And like, I think that is connecting in a different way to artists who feel the pressure to like produce something that's like, you need all the gear and you need it.
Right.
And when you see somebody at that level do something so accessible, like it just changes the paradigm of what's important. But in particular, that was in 2020 when I was doing that work. I think that part of the cycle was like very heavy on a lot of media and like what's the magic trick that you could do in the room that like nobody else can do. And the thing with doing stuff like that is like, if you want to go for it, if you want to like make that statement and do something that makes such a splash, you get an Emmy for whatever, is like, it's actually, when you're doing it, it's very uncomfortable. It is not fun most of the time.
Yeah.
It's actually like very painful.
Sure, you feel a little disillusioned. You don't know really what the hell you're doing
it's like
a lot of the time.
It's a science experiment. You're like, oh man, we should have just done something more straightforward. And so sometimes that is the way to go. You could like, look, there's no magic trick here. We're just going to go back to the classics and do it really well. But yeah, with the show that I did in Shanghai, it's like, it's a 9-week production. You're doing like the most complicated format of this. Like we were working with the folks at Epic Games to develop Unreal Engine 4.26 on like virtual production paradigm. And it was so painful to do it. Like little things you'd find is like, oh my God, there's this one line in C++, we got to change the parentheses and now the frame rate's back up. And you're like,
right.
Dude, this is so hard.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just like at the very edge of your patience doing it. And then when you deliver, you're like, wow, we did it. And so that is an instance where like, yeah, there's a lot of tech on that show, a lot of tech. And I think for a while now, it's been bouncing back, but I think it's going to come back to the tech. Like a lot of the stuff that Possible does at Sphere right now is like, it's Vegas Sphere. It's crazy. I think the proliferation of those super cinema screens, like, way bigger than IMAX, this kind of thing, that's probably going to change the perception of like live entertainment. Because even though it is screen playback, I think like that crowd communal experience, like sports and stuff like that, it's just, people love watching things together and, the crowd reaction. So, I mean, I guess my original answer to your question is basically like, I believed in that in 2010 when I founded Possible, like that tech and entertainment would become more married over time. Yeah. And now I think we're on the precipice of like seeing even more change with all the AI stuff that's coming out. Like, how's that going to impact traditional pipelines? How's that going to,
Right.
It's very complicated and it's changing very fast.
Yeah. I can relate. We're building a project right now, which started out as a stage show, and we're making it as an immersive experience, and it's called Neurosymphony. Yeah. And participants can wear brain scanners, which then affect the outcome of the music and the visuals that they experience as we're performing live. And so every day it's like, I'm like building rockets and I'm completely out of my element, and I'm like trusting people who I'm meeting along the way. To just, it's a big leap of faith in a way that I am deeply out of my element.
You know what though, I was thinking about that, like with AI in particular, the mental model that I've kind of put together is like, it's like driving in a car before GPS, and then cars get GPS. Yeah. And you're more willing to go on an adventure because you're less likely to get lost. If you think about like back in the olden days, like road trips, like, oh, well, we don't want to like
veer off for 3 hours.
Like we don't know what's over there.
Right.
But then once you get GPS, there's like less arguing about directions. It's like, oh, I got lost, but like we could figure it out on the way back. And that's how I feel about like integrating AI into the workflows. It's not like, oh, I'm just doing it's GPS for topics I don't understand. It gives you very prescriptive instructions, and you'd be like, okay, well, I kind of wanted to build this rocket. Right. And it's like, it starts explaining that stuff, and you're like, okay, cool. Like I feel comfortable to go down that path and kind of cross-pollinate it with this other idea. So I have a lot of friends that are like scared of AI too, like they're very analog, or they see it as maybe something that could take their job or something. But I see it as more as like, it's just like getting GPS in your car. Okay. Yeah. So you could like go adventure into topics that you normally would be discouraged.
Sure. I think as long as you can keep it at that sort of a healthy distance, right? As opposed to feeling like the AI in some way hires you to go in a certain direction.
We're all working for the AI,
Yeah. I feel that a lot. Like, I feel like our productivity has moved forward as a creative music studio. I feel like we do complete more projects, but we now have many more incomplete, halfway done projects than ever before as well.
Of course, yeah.
It's like all these ideas just halfway put together, halfway baked. It's like, what are we gonna do with all this? And it consumes space in your mind, right? Yeah. You're like, God, AI's got me working.
It's got you working. Yeah. Everybody that I meet that's vibe coding is just like so tired because they're working day and night. They're working on their harness. They're figuring out how to, get it on their phones so that they can do it all. But that's kind of like, it's not quite the same, but I think at least in the American dream or whatever, like people go, oh, I want to be my own boss. I want to be my own boss. I don't want a boss. I want to be my own boss. I want to work for myself. And it's like, there's no such thing. Like, even when you get to the top, like me as the CEO of Yuga, it's like, that doesn't make you boss. That means you work for everybody. Yeah. That's what a CEO does. You work for everybody's your boss. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like, you always think, oh, there's like some level, like, I guess they sell that in like entrepreneurial, like, I don't know, fiction, like that you're working for, but I think everybody works for somebody. Yeah. And I think, AI doesn't steal your work. It just makes you work harder. It makes you work more. And filtering, saying no to the right thing is like very critical.
Yes.
So otherwise you do wind up with a bunch of half-built stuff or you fully built it, but you don't have time to maintain it.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Before WENEW and before Yuga, before any of it, you had mentioned in multiple interviews that you learned about NFTs from Beeple.
Yeah.
Right. I can't think of a better way to be introduced. Most people have heard of NFTs from headlines. You heard from the guy whose JPEG sold for $69 million at Christie's and more, right? What did Mike actually show you that flipped the switch? And what did he say that the headlines missed?
Yeah. So we were working together up until like September 2020. And then just at the end of a job, he was like, hey, I'm going to go do this NFT thing. And I'm like, what's an NFT?
Right.
And he's like, well, it's a non-fungible token. You can take art and you can tokenize it. You can build a story around it. I was like, okay, cool, man. Like, I work with a lot of creative people. A lot of people go like, I got to go off and do a project for a second. And you're like, okay, what is that project about? You learn a little bit about it. And so this wasn't like an abnormal thing. People go off and they do their projects all the time. But he came back like a couple weekends later in October or something. He was like, okay, I just sold these 2 pieces for like $300,000 or something like that. And I was like real dollars? Or like, he's like, yeah. And so, I was like, wow, that's really weird. What is going on with it? He's like, dude, you got to look at it. It's just like, it is a thing for digital art that like you can do. And I was always crypto curious. Like I bought my first Bitcoin back in like 2013, 2014. Like I was really interested in ICOs we're having Ethereum. So like I'd seen multiple cycles of crypto, but like they didn't resonate with me other than like taking money and investing. Like I didn't connect with any of it deeply. I think this cycle was different because it was based off of content. Like content was the main thing. You could tokenize NFTs and all this other stuff. So like I was like, oh, I know that. That stuff I actually know about. Yeah. And it was so open-ended. Like that's the stuff that I actually thrive at. But I was just talking to him like normal, regular conversations throughout. But like he was having pretty meteoric rise. I think by December he had sold, on Nifty Gateway. It was like $3 million of NFTs. And then January, like people were trading for $5 million. And so, he actually came out to LA and we had dinner that January. There was another collector that went to dinner with us too. And we were just talking about where does everything go from here?
Right.
And I was still just watching from the side. I was very like clued in, but I was watching from the sidelines. I didn't want to I didn't know how to participate in it yet. And just hearing them talk about the possibilities of what NFTs can be, it was just like very clear focus to intro me into the field. Yeah, when March came and, the Christie's thing, he sold it for $69 million. It was like, okay, I think things are very different. Honestly, like I thought one very real outcome is just like, all right, bro. And he just rides off into the sunset. Like he's done. He made $69 million. But that's, dude, he didn't show up as an artist. Like he built a piece every day for like, I don't know, 13 years, 14 years. I can't even remember. Yeah. I've always known him as somebody who's worked on a piece every day.
Right.
And so when you level up that hard and you get that industrious, it was just so on brand for him to be like, okay, cool. I made that money and now I'm going to take all that money and double down on myself.
Yes.
And it's like, that was totally the right person for that to happen to, because then he started building, his facility in South Carolina, and it's like 50,000 square foot facility and sinking, millions, tens of millions into it. Back into himself.
Yeah.
And he could have just been done.
Right.
But, I'd argue he's actually like having even bigger moments now with like at Basel. He just did this like really amazing installation at Basel that like caught the whole art world by storm. And so he's still showing up all the time and, having a new thing to put out there. And it's really a commendable thing. Like, he's a very special person for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that moment change your friendship?
I think that's one of the things. I just knew him for so long.
Yeah.
Like, it did change in some regard. Like, of course, it changes in some regard because, like, we're hanging out in New York, but, like, as we're walking down the street, people are, like, asking for autographs. And so it's like, you have to have the self-realization to be like, oh, yeah, my buddy who I just knew was talented and very good at this, like, he's now this generation's, like, Murakami or Warhol. And that's a very surreal thing to, like, realize.
Yeah.
But I think we've always had a relationship because we worked together, so like we always had a relationship where we could like talk about the work independent of whatever status you could have, like, is this good? Or how do you beat up this idea, you know? So like, I think that's always been the same, but if anything, I just have like more and more respect for the guy, because I think he could have just stopped. Yeah. But he's like doubling down. He's very inspirational.
Wow. It's fantastic. Yeah, that's you're right. It happened to the right person then. Yeah. That's a good sign. You know, backpedaling, I mentioned to you, we have this, neurosymphony. Yeah. I'm curious, in your wide web of creativity and your network, who do you think is worth looking at in this day and age that is really kind of shaping how biometrics work with technology and art?
There's an artist named Sogwen. I don't know if you've heard her. She wears like, like a something on her head. And I've seen her where she just did a thing in Hong Kong or Basel where like there's a large kind of canvas. She's like making artwork, but like her brainwaves are also making the artwork. So I think there's a lot of that kind of like, what can you co-create with machines? Yes. Like that as a question. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's a lot of artists who are doing cool things that escape me, but like, in interactive media, there's always been this idea of like real-time graphics or real-time installations where, you move your hand in particles, move through the air. I just went to Rafik Anadol's new setup at Data Land in Los Angeles. Okay. It opens, I think it just opened this week, but I saw a preview of it, and it's like that, amazing scale, interactive.
Yeah, just awe-inspiring.
Awe-inspiring, yeah. And I think more and more you're seeing that even creep into consumer products, like from Meta, where you could be wearing the glasses, but then doing gestures with your hand. Yep. And so I think like non-traditional inputs into devices, and you're seeing with like Elon and Neuralink, like people who are clinically blind, like we could enable, that's crazy, like miracle level stuff.
Or play World of Warcraft with faster reaction time than any abled human, right?
Yeah, so like, using machines to extend you like an appendage. I think that stuff's going to happen more and more, but it's definitely a field that is worth observing, and I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things come out of it.
Sure. Like speaking of kind of staying on your course, and whether that's Ikigai or life passion, life mission, you co-founded WENEW with Beeple and is it Guy Osieri?
Yep.
In 2021. Then Yuga acquired it in 2022. Walk me through the emotional arc of building something, selling it into the biggest brand in NFTs, and then staying to run it. Most founders leave after acquisition, right? You stayed and kept climbing.
So we founded WENEW, and we honestly went to market. So after the $69 million piece was sold, there was a lot of like venture interest. And one of the ideas that we had literally in the dinner in January that I told you about was this idea of like, there's a project called NBA Top Shot, which was tokenizing moments in basketball. Yeah. So LeBron's dunk, something like that. And we were like, that's a really interesting concept. I think you could do that, but for any kind of moment. So you could like go to the Michael Jackson state and tokenize the moonwalk, sell editions of the moonwalk. Yeah. Or Neil Armstrong, editions of the moon landing, Yeah. And so we went out with that idea, and there was so much like investor interest at the time to try and figure out the space that we had this idea, and it was a very good idea. I still think it's a great idea to this day. And raised money on it, put together a really good team, shipped it. And I thought we would have like a demand problem, but we actually had a supply problem. Like the financialization of memory is such a complicated thing. Like this is what happens when you like try to do something so radical, and you're like, what obstacles are we going to run into? The ones you expect weren't obstacles, but there's these other obstacles you didn't expect, and they're actually very hard to overcome. So like you learn through the process, and even you have great advisors. Nobody along the way knows, because you're really in uncharted territory. Got stuck, and we tried something else, like another idea. I came from a world where like in my old life, there was like a waiting list if you wanted to work with me. Yeah. And then I came to this new industry. It's very humbling, right? Because you're like, okay, nothing I did before matters, transfers over. It's a whole new you. And that's very frustrating, but it is a good exercise to go through at some point in your career, right? Yeah. I was just like, I had 40 different people on the 1 yard line. I could not get these people to work with me. It was so difficult. And in my frustration, I was like, well, so what is working in this space? And I looked, and there's another project called Artifact, and they were like taking CryptoPunks, and they were taking artwork and wrapping them around like an Air Force One. And everybody loved it. And I'm like, I get it. It's taking something people love and taking another thing people love and putting them together.
Right. Okay.
But my background is in like digital design, so I'm like, I could do that. I could do that for all the Bored Apes. I could do this. So I made a project that was like a derivative project. It did very well.
Okay. And so this with Puma?
This is called 10KTF. So
10KTF. Okay, sure.
Yeah, my first NFT was a Beeple. My first PFP was a Bored Ape.
Yeah.
So like those are the first 2 NFTs that I bought. I got very lucky on the exposure to that. There's this essayist named Kevin Kelly. He writes essays about interesting things. And his whole thing was like, the great invention of the internet is that you don't need to be like a Taylor Swift or a Justin Bieber. You don't need 250 million fans. You just need 1,000 true fans. And so the essay is called 1,000 True Fans. And it's like, if you have 1,000 true fans, like people that, if you drop an album, they're going to go, they're going to buy it. If you do a show, they're going to drive 2 hours to see it. If you sell a shirt there, they're going to buy the shirt. They're going to, like 1,000 true fans is all you need to make it as an artist. And so my team and I were talking to each other and we're like, where are the 1,000 true fans in Web3? Where are the 1,000 true fans in blockchain? And we were like, dude, there's not 1,000 true fans. There's these, like Bored Apes, there's 10,000 Bored Apes. There's 10,000 Cool Cats. There's 10, so like there's all these different projects that made 10,000 units of a thing. So we're like, there's actually groups of 10,000 true fans everywhere in Web3. We should build a community of communities that brings them all together. So that's why I call the project 10KTF. It stands for 10,000 true fans.
Right.
And we built that project out almost like a weekly serial. Like it was in a way about like digital fashion, but it was that to tell a story. And the story tonally was like watching Kill Bill on the blockchain. It was like Kill Bill every week. We had like a 1-hour show every week, and the whole team killed themselves every week to produce that.
Right.
And the conceit was like, in this industry where like, crypto kind of has a bad reputation sometimes, but like if you could say, hey, we don't know if we're going to get it right, but we're going to show up every week and ship something. Like people start getting addicted to like, okay, well, I'll show up. Even if you step on a rake or this thing isn't so good, it's like, it's okay. We're going to be back next week, And so people, because you're shipping all the time, people will have a lot of grace for you. And so it's this weekly serial that we kept going for like so long, but it was really a grind. And the way the Yuga acquisition came together was, as we were building it in parallel, Yuga had a project called Other Side, and it was a community of communities. It was like the thing that everybody was going to come together in. And I was like, that's it. Like we should be premier developers on that product. So one of the Guy Osiri, I consider him a mentor. Like he's definitely taught me a lot of stuff. He was also working deeply with Yuga at the time. So he put me together with the founders of Yuga. I just had like a tight 5-minute pitch. Like, hey, I'm gonna sit down with you and explain to you why I think you should work with us. And here's my perspective. And that like 5-minute pitch turned into like a 3-hour conversation, and by the end of it, they were like, what if we just like bought your company and you just work with us?
Wow.
Because I think we were like very much seeing things through the same lens.
Right.
So Possible was a company that I bootstrapped. There's no outside investors. I started in my bedroom in Burbank, and now it's got offices in LA and New York. There was thinking about opening an office in Riyadh. There's no investors in that. It's different. So the fundamentals of that business is you just got to make more money than you spend.
Right.
When you get into venture, you raise on a safe note, you do all this stuff, you even like early rounds, you could be, at WENEW, we were spending tons of money every month, like $250,000, $300,000 a month to operate a team, and you don't have revenue yet. It's very normal in tech.
Right.
But that's a very uncomfortable spot for me as like a bootstrapped entrepreneur to 100%. Navigate.
100%.
Because you were just spending tons of money.
And you want to have answers.
And there's no revenue to associate with.
Right.
With 10KTF, we were doing pretty well, but we were also putting a lot of it back into like nobody was taking money off the table. We were just putting it back into the project. We started entering into M&A, and I hadn't done M&A before, so mergers and acquisitions conversations. So there's like, okay, hadn't raised venture before, hadn't operated venture before, now I have to sell this company through an M&A process. And it was long and it was grueling, and throughout the process, like we had like 9 black swans in a row. There was like, okay, first of all, for the first time in a decade, like the Federal Reserve raised interest rates from 0 to 4%. Liquidity's gone. So the party is over on liquidity. There were a bunch of firms like Celsius, like Lunaterra. There was all of this stuff doing cataclysmic multi-billion-dollar crashes. And so you saw the market like start to turn while we're in the middle of this M&A, and it became very clear. It's like, okay, you have to go raise and figure it out fast, and people might not want to cut you a check, or you have to go and onboard into this other thing. So like at first it started like, oh, we have options. And then like 1 or 2 months into the process, I was like, no, we have to go all in. And to the founder, the founders of Yuga, like to credit them, like they could have just held me over the coals and been like, no, we want you, there's no way out. You got to do it. But they wanted it to not leave a sour taste in anybody's. They were like, no, we're going to do this. We believe you are the right person to have involved. So they did it. One of the real struggles in all of that is actually my dad passed away, like right in the middle of it. It was abrupt. It was like in the middle of all of this work stuff, and he had a call and he's like, okay, I need help going to the doctor. And it's like, boom, you have stage 4 cancer. And then it was like, wait, how long does that? And within 3 weeks, it was gone. It was quick. And so like having to like navigate that and then land the plane, that's a hard process because your team, you build a really badass team. They really believe in themselves. They're like, we're going to be a multi-billion-dollar company. Like, let's figure this out. And you kind of have the experience as an entrepreneur to be like, I'm looking at all my dashboards and all my dashboards are telling me this is the outcome we have to go for. And it 100% was the right outcome. Like, if you looked at what happened after that, like we got acquired and we started at Yuga the same week FTX collapsed. So I think we got over just right before things got really difficult for most companies in Web3. I mean, what happened was like a huge arc after that. Like I think Yuga did what anybody would do in their shoes, which is like they raised at a strong valuation, raised a lot of money. Let's get the best pedigrees that money can buy. So they got a lot of very good, like polished executives in. It's tough. It's like, it's hard to blame any one thing. It's just like, you ever seen an NBA team that casts all-stars and like they can't really play together? It's an unbalanced team.
Right.
It's kind of like that.
Team syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Where we had such great talent on paper, but it was hard to ship anything. Over time, it just got harder and harder. And I think ultimately in this space that I work in, and this isn't true of all industries, but it may be true of a lot of them, I think authenticity is more important than pedigree. I think when I look for people to hire, I focus less on what they've achieved in the past and more what is their curiosity now as a person. And you see this, like this exists, I'm sure it exists everywhere. Like I rationalize this as like, okay, look how crazy AI is now, how many data centers they're building. There weren't that many people that knew how to build like liquid cooled data centers before like 2 years ago. Yeah. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that showed up and they're like, I have no idea how to do this. Neither do many other people. So like, I'm here to learn. It reminds me of my time when I was like learning everything on like glow in the dark for Kanye, right? Like you just open the manuals and you read them. Yeah, I think that's really important in this space. You need to find people that like focus less on their pedigree. Like that's why the whole time I wasn't even like, I was pretty anonymous. Like I didn't want to rest on any kind of laurels of the past. I wanted to say, this is what I can accomplish. And these are the lessons I've learned in this industry. This is why it works. Yeah, so we went through a really tumultuous phase where like one of the original founders came back and he took over the company again. Pretty much all the folks that we brought in with those like high flying pedigrees, like I don't actually have anything negative to say to them other than it didn't work out. But we basically retooled the whole company, filtered it all down, restacked the priorities just back to Bored Ape Yacht Club, other side, now ApeCoin. And, Gaga, who's the co-founder that came back, he just grinded at it for 2 years. And then at the end of last year, we started having conversations about what it would look like for me to take over. Sure. And I had a lot of very specific thoughts about that. I was pretty reluctant, to be honest. I was like, I don't really want to do that. That's a very hard job. Right. It's tough. Yeah. But have worked through a lot of those things. And now, I've been in the seat I started 3 months ago privately, but like I announced it about 2 months ago. So I had like a month of overlap where I got to like start doing things without like a lot of scrutiny. Sure. So
a little time to gain some speed on the runway.
Yeah, it just gives you, because if you announce, like there's almost a certain amount of theater associated with the announce. Sure. And it's like, well, I don't get to push my agenda. It's like, it is, if anybody is out there thinking about like, how do I handle a transition? I'm like, you should probably start that transition and not announce it and just like get your legs under you. Right. And so once you have momentum, then you announce it and you can drop a lot of stuff.
Keep running. Absolutely. The management of teams and personalities is a lifelong mission. And on that topic of alignments, Web3 is infamously small. You're personally close to opposite sides of major community disputes. Whales, founders, investigators, artists. Sometimes the same person who built the protocol is now feuding with the holder who funded it. How do you stay the bridge instead of becoming a faction? What's your actual operating principle when two people you respect publicly turn on each other?
I'd say it's changed over time. And I've kind of discovered more of an answer that's unique to me. I think when it comes to like conflict resolution or figuring out what your strategy is, I was initially very like secretive about it, and I wanted to like get it perfect on a draft and like get the questions and answers just right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of choreography to like get something like that out right. I think like I like to just keep it honest and authentic and say like, if I don't know the answer, I'll just say, hey, I don't know the answer yet, but this is what I think is the answer. And I don't know, I think in some ways like people mistake not knowing for like weakness.
Right.
But I actually think if you're like, hey, I know this is a strong opinion over here, strong opinion over here, this I'm not too sure about, but I think, because I know these two things we should probably head in this direction.
Right.
People would rather hear that than like, this is the full plan, it's going to work.
Yeah.
Because then when it doesn't work, you get like disenchanted. It's better to kind of like be honest with what you're knowing. Even these questions, like, I don't know what you're gonna ask. Like, it's just better to like respond the way you think it's going to go down. If it doesn't work out, it's the same thing as I was doing on 10KTF, where it's like, hey, I might step on a rake, now and again. Like I might make a mistake, but like I'll be back tomorrow. And you'll be hearing a new plan from me. That's how I've carried myself. Like, more recently, it's just like it's much easier to put out a lot more stuff if you're like as upfront as possible with as much as you can be. There are a lot of tensions, and I've always been a doxed founder. Like everybody knows my name. I don't hide behind a moniker. My photos out in public, whatever. It does get a little bit like tricky sometimes because there's people of all different backgrounds in the community, and that's one of the reasons why I go out and I say I got to meet these people. So you have to you do the vibe check in real life and all that stuff. But it could get scary at times. In the last cycle, I remember there's like some people that were coming by and like taking photos of my house, taking photos of where I work, and just posting them online. I'm like, oh, don't do that. That's weird.
Tokenized?
Yeah, meant it. There's all of these things in France, for instance, where like there's people getting kidnapped and stuff like that. So like, there's a lot of money on the line. There's livelihoods on the line. You can't be disrespectful about it, but there's always these kind of like conflicts that can come up. I try to resolve them kind of like openly. I try not to fight too much in public. Like, I think that's one of the principles, like praise in public, but disagree in private. Like, if there is a disagreement, you got to sidebar that. You got to take that into a DM. You got to hop on a phone call and talk it out. It's not really good form to be like, I disagree with this and we're going to sort this out in public for every problem.
To make it performative and dramatic.
I have done, there were certain things that I disagreed with and I will post about it. But like the post is a call to action to be like, hey, can someone pick up the phone and call me about this?
Right.
And like somebody does.
Right.
And then I'll do a follow-up. I'll be like, hey, we resolved it. I don't think it's weird. Like in Web3, I think, people can talk at you. Like Twitter is like having an inbox that everybody can see. Here's my email box. Everybody's just tagging me about something. Right. They could see whether you've read it or not, whether you respond. And it's just like, there's a lot of noise on there. And I think the worst version of it is like, I've talked to many other founders, many other builders. And when you're building for a community, it's like, if they start talking to you like you're their waiter, and it's like, okay, not your waiter. You know what I mean? We've got busy, other priorities,
Sure.
And so that's when you stop like responding to things and stop trying to engage. But like, you are dealing with a lot of different personas, But by and large, for the most part, I'm talking about corner cases right now, but by and large, it is one of the best things to be able to like engage with a community. Like the Bored Ape Yacht Club is like, these problems are few and far between. You know what I mean? Like, I think what we are really focused on right now is like, how do we get our message out there that this is the best club in the internet? And there is like 99% alignment on like the value system, how you move through the world. And that makes it really easy to like, kind of push forward.
I love what you said about, not fabricating answers and not pretending to be, the fearless leader all the time. I think
it's exhausting. It's so hard.
It's a little delusioned as well, right? To assume that we could
or you think
fearlessly
you're making,
choose.
I'm going to just tell my team like, oh, it's all going to be okay. And it's not. It's like, No, but then what happens if it's not okay? Like, you should be honest with them, you know, like,
then
hey,
people
this
start
is
measuring your hit rate and how many times did he guess right, and is he guessing, right?
Right. Whereas like you go, hey guys, we're about to walk through this one-way door, and if it messes up, like bad things could happen. So these are the 3 things we need to protect against. Like that is much better to hear than like, doesn't matter, we'll figure, you know, it's all gonna be okay. It might not be, you know?
Yeah. I think throughout the last, we're coming up on half a decade now of very tumultuous and sudden changes around the world.
Yeah.
One thing I've embraced, which is very much in line with what you said, is that I'll tell our teams, we may not have the answer, but if we all have good heads on our shoulders and we work together as a team, we will have a solution.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's exactly what you've been, in a paraphrase, is exactly what you've been saying. I wanted to ask a question about, someone who is both creative but entrepreneurial, prolific in both spaces. How do you relate to your creations and the idea of, knowing where the start is, where the end is, how to let go, when to hold on, like when you've got so many ideas kind of floating at the same time?
Yeah, there's this phrase, I was saying a lot of my friends have side projects and stuff. There's this phrase in filmmaking is like, films aren't finished, they're abandoned. Like you just literally throw everything you have at it and you're just like, I just think it's done.
Yeah.
And
ship it.
Yeah. So there's like, I don't know, there's this almost fiction where people go, oh, I conceived it all in my head. I fully rendered it and realized it. I do think to some degree that exists in like commercial spots and music videos. When it comes to like longer form projects that push you to the limit, like most of the time it's just people just go like, I think I'm just done with this project. I think I have to call it and move on, you know? You got to go through that process like a lot, like hundreds of times, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of get a sense of when is it enough, right? You know, when is it? So like lately I've just been trying to focus on like less the artistic side, more the commercial side. Like what's really important here in this project? What am I trying to get done? How do I know it's successful? And that's actually been like a lot more peaceful for creating, because you're like, look, this thing doesn't need to be Citizen Kane. Like I'm out here like trying to like want to hit this beat and this vibe, and if I get within 90% of it, like boom, shipped, right? There are other projects where I'm like, no, this one is going to be 100. Like we're going to nail this until they pry it from my hands. I will like stay awake every minute I can until all the details are there. Like there is that, but that you can't. It's really difficult to do that. Every single project. It's also not necessarily like the trade-offs you have to make for that. Like, you could have been doing something else, like another project that could have moved you forward in a different way with the time that it took to fight for every single detail in this first project. So it just depends what the trade-off is, right?
Sure, absolutely. To add a little bit more depth to your comment about how stepping into the digital asset world brought a whole new level of uncertainty, maybe stress, pressure, turbulence, right? You just led what they called a white hat rescue of 68 NFTs, including 29 Bored Apes and 2 Cyberpunks, from a flooring protocol exploit. First, walk us through what that exactly meant. This is crisis leadership in real time with millions of dollars on the table.
Yeah.
Take me into that room. What was the first 30 minutes like? And then what ended up ensuing from there?
Yeah, maybe some background. So there's a protocol called flooring protocol, and it's a fractionalization protocol. So you could take a Bored Ape, you could put it in flooring protocol and exchange it for 100 million tokens. And if you're able to put together 100 million tokens, like say you buy some on the open market, you could trade them in for another Bored Ape that's in the protocol. So there's a guy named Freelance Capital, and he basically bought dozens of Bored Apes and he put them all into this protocol. And it was a great way for people to of partial ownership of a Bored Ape. And I met him in Hong Kong actually in 22. So I've met him face to face. He had moved on from the protocol, maybe, I don't know when exactly, maybe a year ago or something. He's doing AI, but I met him. Quit, who's our VP of blockchain at Yuga Labs. He's probably one of the best blockchain people out there. And there was a hack earlier in the day on flooring, but there's some exploit. And so I saw him write up a little thing about it, and then he deleted the tweet. And then he posted like, hey, I'll talk about that in a second. So I actually just like texted him on the phone, sent him a message. I was like, what's going on? He goes, I think there's actually a twist on the exploit where the attacker might not know it yet, but you could take that same exploit and do this other thing to it, and there's a lot more at risk. And so I go, okay, what's at risk? He's like, well, 29 Bored Apes, like a lot of stuff, like you say, a lot of money. So I go, what do you need? Like, can you white hat this? And he goes, yeah. So our friend Coffee is another dev that works at a different company. He was at his computer and Quit was away. So they kind of, I didn't really lead this as much as like, how can I be of service to like what seems to be a brewing problem?
Right.
Because we had so much momentum behind us. Like if somebody were to hack this protocol, get 29 Bored Apes, throw it at the floor, it would set us back so much. It would set a lot of stuff back. So white hatting is this process of like, you know, we are going to go exploit it before the bad guys can to save all this stuff.
Right.
And so Coffee and Quit, like they went to work, but to do it, they needed resources. They needed like 2 of each NFT. So they need 2 Bored Apes, you know, two CryptoPunks for everything to work. So we had a trading desk that was already kind of like trading NFTs. I called up the guy, PP Man, who was like managing a lot of that stuff. And I go, look, we got a situation. We need to get Quit and Coffee. Like
they needed this in order to examine the architecture or as a
they needed this in order
to
actually do the exploit.
Okay.
You needed 2 of each NFT.
Okay.
But you know, you pick up 2 CryptoPunks. I don't know. I think they're like 30 ETH right now. So you're spending like 6 figures worth of resources on multiple NFTs. So like, I'm making it up. Maybe you need like $300,000 or $400,000 of inventory of a thing.
Sure.
And you need it like right now.
To set up a virtual checkmate on the board and watch,
Right, to do it all.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different than how you would imagine, because like, you know that this exploit exists. They actually have to pre-build a way to yank everything out in one go. Because if they just take the Bored Apes, somebody might see that and go, how do they do that? And then now you're racing against the people who saw you do this.
Yeah.
And all these other communities are in jeopardy.
Right.
So you actually, for several hours, are just sitting on this piece of information. You're like, we just have to set all of this up, and in one transaction, we're going to pull everything out of the protocol.
Yeah.
I wrote about it as the CEO of Yuga because I knew that people were going to see us like yank a bunch of stuff. Somebody's going to see somebody on chain.
Right.
Like, everybody's going to see somebody doing it, and I wanted people to know it was us, so that they didn't panic. They didn't think like, oh, they're going to crash the market.
Right.
I wanted them to know that it was the good guys doing it. And part of what gave me confidence, and I reached out to Freelunch because I met him 4 years ago in real life.
Right.
I knew he's a good guy. You know, in Web3, whenever there's like something that goes wrong, it's like, okay, well, it was this guy's fault. This pitchforks, you know, we're coming after this guy. It's like, no. Right. This is a good guy. He's actually not even involved anymore. This is a very advanced kind of like a hack.
Right, vulnerability.
And, you know, I think we could be at risk of seeing more and more of that stuff with AI, with like this Mythos level AI, these very extreme corner case hacks in these smart contracts. It's such a tight case of manipulation. Like, man, how is AI not helping with this thing? But I got in touch with him, and, you know, he stepped up. And even though people were like, well, keep an eye on him, he could be trying to pull a fast one. It's like, because I knew him from IRL, I could vouch for him in a way. And that's another reason why I think it's good to do those vibe checks in person. So you could actually like defend somebody if something's going wrong.
Yeah.
So that was the nature of it. Like I'm journaling about it, I'm chronicling it for people. I could retell the story. It's really like flowers go to Quit and Coffee, who gave up their Sundays with their families to be able to like go rescue all this stuff.
Glad it was able to, like you said, glad the good guys were able to get there first. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of pull the pieces off the board. You know, with us being squarely in the space of introspection, gaining of self-awareness and self-improvement, motivation, what would you say for our UpgradeMe listeners who want actionable upgrades? What would you give your earlier self in terms of upgrades? If you could, you know, give the Trinity upgrade to, you know, fly a helicopter, or, you know, if you could get Kung Fu or whatever, and you see yourself, you know, coming out, young guy coming out of UC Santa Barbara, what upgrade would you first give your former self? I would actually put 3 things on the table, not just one. And 2 of them I want to steal from Tony Robbins, if this is a motivational thing. But like the first one is actually something that I have honed over a long time, and it is a borrowed phrase. It's not something I've come up with, but I believe in it. I think pressure is a privilege, right? Like I think if you come to work and you're not feeling pressure, then you don't really care about it.
For you to come to work and feel pressure, that's a privilege. Not everybody feels that, right? I tell people that like when they're feeling a lot of pressure, you know, I've been under crazy amounts of pressure in these live events where like it's go time.
Yeah.
You gotta nail it.
Everybody's on the tightrope. Yeah.
Everybody's on tightrope together. In those moments, you realize humans can handle a lot of pressure, like a lot, and execute. I think what humans cannot handle a lot of is stress. I think if you mismanage pressure, it could turn into stress. And so I ask my team a lot of the time, are you feeling pressure or are you feeling stress? And if they say pressure, they almost are able to calm themselves.
Right.
But if they're like, I'm feeling stress, it's like, why is it stress? It's like, because I haven't prepared enough. All right, go prepare. You know what I mean? Like you have to like transform that stuff. So I think like pressure is a privilege. It has to be earned, and make sure what you're feeling is like pressure and not stress. Because I think you could handle almost infinite amount of pressure. I don't think people can really handle that much stress, right? So you just got to make sure it's the right thing. So that's my first thing. These other techniques, it's funny, like one of them is just like a morning ritual. So 2 Tony Robbins things, just as self-help things that have helped me along the way. I don't do them as much as I used to, but like 10-minute mornings, it's a muscle you work out. So it's basically 3 sets of 3. You first, and I can't really remember the order, but I think it's like, you first think of 3 things that you're thankful for. And you spend a minute on each of those things. You think of 3 things that like, what if you change them in your life today and you did nothing else would give you the most impact, right? So it kind of prioritizes in your mind. And then like
the quadrants,
yeah, like what are 3 things that you want for somebody else? I think those are the 3 things. So it's like, it's actually 9 minutes, but it's like, what are your priorities that like, if you got them done today would change your life? What are you thankful for? And I think that one's the most interesting because it's like, you do have to practice gratitude. It's a muscle. And I think I wasn't doing it for myself or others for a while. And that really helped me. I was doing it for years. Like, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be like, I'm thankful for like how the breeze outside today. It's a very nice breeze. Because if you always have to be thankful for these crazy things, like you have to be thankful for simple things. And the third is like just thinking of others. Like what do you want for other people? What to get done? So those 9-minute mornings are really good. The third idea is called RPM. And it's a result, purpose, and map. Usually, like if you're an entrepreneur or creative, you wind up having a really long to-do list. Okay, here's my to-do list. You go to your team, you to-do list this, you to-do list this, and you just tasks, lists of tasks. I remember I was like drowning in lists of tasks. I would spend all Sunday thinking of all the tasks that I have to do. I'm like, dang, I spend a whole afternoon just thinking of the tasks, right? So I could break these down to people. And there's this exercise that really helped me, which is RPM. So you just think of it like a motor, RPM. It's a result. When you are leading a team, you need to just tell people the result that you want. And then the second step is you tell them the purpose for that result. I want this to be the result because this is why. And then the third step is map. And the map you don't make. You empower your team to make it because they understand the result and the purpose, so they can go make the map. And when I shifted to doing that, I stopped spending all of Sunday thinking of all the tasks because the tasks are the map. What you got to do is you have to share the result and the purpose to your team and empower them to make the map because their map might be better than yours. You might be too tired. And you hired experts. So those are the 3 things, man. Like I think pressure is a privilege. I think these 9-minute mornings and RPM, those different points in the time, they've helped me in different ways.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, the rumors are true. I'm so glad we had a chance to connect. You are a sage in the digital storm that we're going through. So thank you. You're welcome back anytime on UpgradeMe. And thank you, bro.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
All right.
Appreciate you having me.